Good morning and welcome to Big Talk. We bring you college sports with a Midwest perspective. We are blue collar and blue blood. I am Sam Sprunger. I am not Dalton Shetler, but he's working in Cancun. That's a tough work assignment, but filling in for him, Tony. Tony, how are we doing today?
Doing great. I mean, I don't know if I'm putting in as much hard work as Dalton working in Cancun. I mean, that's
let's.
oof.
Oh, it's tough. Oh, he told me he's like, I'm gonna be out because I'm gonna be working in Cancun. I'm like, you're a liar. You're not working anywhere.
Man, you know how many tears are just welling up right now
Oh
for
well,
Dalton?
I
Like
feel
how
for him.
bad I feel for him.
Feel for him. You know, it's 28 degrees here, and he's standing in a bucket hat and shorts.
Right on the beach, probably enjoying a mimosa.
Well, I know he is really actually doing some work because it's feast week, as they call it. It's feast week. The what is it? The worldwide leader in sports is what they call this week. That's what they call this week because obviously the holidays are going. They're up and rolling. But we also have a ton of things going on. We have college football has their rivalry week. It's always the last week of the season. We've got some big rivalries in the Big Ten. Not as big none as big as the game we can't say the game, right? Because didn't Ohio State patent the
they trademarked it, yes.
Trademarked it. That's what it is, not patent it, but they trademarked it. So you have to call it the game.
I still refuse to.
Yeah,
I do it to every other team. I'm like, no, it's the Michigan State Spartans. You know, I never give Ohio State that credit.
But so we have then we have a lot of happening in the basketball world. A lot of Big Ten teams taking part in preseason tournaments. This is the season for preseason tournaments. Obviously, you've got the Maui tournament. I had some vested interest in that, but you have the fight for Atlantis or the battle for Atlantis, or there's so many. They're almost like bowl games, but they're a lot more fun because they matter.
They matter a lot more.
and not in the case, or not in the aspect of whether you win or lose, but you get to play some teams that you wouldn't normally see, and they're better teams. You sign up for a tournament and you might get the Maui tournament because they have to do these in advance. They have to book these out years in advance, or at least a couple of years in advance. So the Maui tournament had 4 of the top 7 teams in the country playing, and that's what you sign up for when you get there. You might get some of those teams that will make you better for March, and just ask Tom Izzo how that works.
I know. As somebody who follows Michigan State basketball, is always so annoying because it's like, man, Tom, we could be that team. We started out as number 4 in the country. If you kind of take some of the cupcake wins, you could potentially do it. But I understand the reasoning because later on in the season, Michigan State's going to be probably the most, if not one of the most battle tested teams when it comes to March and when it matters the most. So
and if you think sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're going to say I can't hate on the process too much, but as a fan, it's like, man, we could look good too at the same time doing it.
Well, and an undefeated season. I just watched. You know what? We'll get back to that. Back. Let's get to football. We're wrapping up the football season. We're getting into the final week of the regular season. One of the Big Ten championship spots is taken up already. Guess who it is, Tony? It's Iowa. Everybody knew it was going to be Iowa. Come on, right? Without
Brian Ferentz
and without
quarterback. Oh yeah, Cade McNamara.
Cade McNamara has been out. He hurt himself. Well, he didn't hurt himself, but he got hurt.
Yeah, he's been out for a couple weeks now.
Well, actually, about a month. I believe it was the beginning of, or right at the end of October, when he got hurt, and that's when we all wondered what is going to happen to Iowa. And now they play this afternoon at noon in a useless, and I use that because they've already clinched. They don't have to win like last year. They had to beat Nebraska to get to the championship game, and they lost. Now they can lose to Nebraska. Not that they want to, but they can. and they don't have to worry about not getting to Indy. They're going to Indy as the last West Division champion.
Yep. And what's crazy too is, have you noticed what Iowa's record is?
Right now it's 8-2 or 9-2. Sorry.
Yeah. They could potentially, if they win at Nebraska, they could go 10-2. Their only losses to Penn State, where they got absolutely destroyed,
Housed,
and a Minnesota game, because again, Big Ten West. Why not have just
a Minnesota game because Iowa is Iowa.
Yes, yes. And here's the other crazy part too, that I don't know if you and Dalton have touched on it. How crazy is it that now, as we're coming to the end of the season, more than likely whoever Iowa faces in the Big Ten championship, they're going to lose. What do you think Kirk Ferentz?
How dare you?
We already know what's going to happen. How do you think Kirk Ferentz is going to come up to his bosses when they say, "Okay, your son is obviously fired because
they've already announced that too,
because you did not meet our contractual obligations of reaching this amount of points." How much you want to bet Kirk is going to go? How many teams fire their offensive coordinator because their team went 10-2 in a season after being abysmal the year before?
As the AD or president of Iowa, whoever he might be talking to, it would be because most of their defenses didn't win their games for them. When the punt return got called back, which is still a ridiculous call. The Cooper DeJean punt return, where he made no above the head wave, but they called him for false or an inadvertent fair catch and then advancement, which is not a penalty. It's just dead ball.
Right.
And so from that point, there was still 1 minute and 20 seconds, and they only had to drive like 20 yards, and they packed it in. Like the announcers packed it in.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, well, that killed our shot. It was 12-10. Like you need to drive like 20 yards and kick a field goal, and you win. That is why Brian Ferentz is being let go.
Yeah.
And not being brought back, because they can't drive 20 yards to try to kick a field goal. That's the issue.
Yeah. Which is crazy.
It is. It absolutely is. And they take on Nebraska today, like I said, at noon on CBS. And it's in Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. The other game that's today is a home game for the home team, but yet they're playing it in Detroit at Ford Field. Penn State, number 11 Penn State, goes to Detroit at Ford Field to play the Michigan State Spartans. Michigan State kind of limping home. They're going to try to maybe cap off a season of uncertainty and the roller coaster that they rode with maybe a big upset to maybe look forward to things going forward from here. Then they can start looking for a head coach, which I haven't. I heard something and I thought, well, that's not a bad idea, but they're trying to wrap it up and get out of town. They're trying to get to the end of the season and start rebuilding and getting ready for next year. They've got to try to retain those players that they've got and not let them hit the portal.
Yes.
Hit the portal, because they're going to want to hire somebody as soon as they possibly can. A, to get the recruiting, and B, to keep those guys on the roster still there.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to have more than that, Tony. I was taking a drink of coffee.
I thought you were taking a pause and then coming back. No, I agree. It's been an up and down year for Michigan State, with the potential, Mel Tucker thing that has happened, with the fact of there's been a lot of inconsistency from the offense. There's been a lot of inconsistency from the defense. Yeah, it's been a lot of a year of adversity for Michigan State. And it's kind of sad too, because it's really, you still notice the good teams, they're absolutely getting destroyed by the bad teams. They either dominate, like if they're technically a Group 5 school, they're going to dominate them. At Power 5 schools, and it's not as close. I mean, you look at Rutgers, they had them throughout the entire game. They ended up blowing it. Then they had them. They ended up getting a win against Nebraska. And they ended up pulling out a win against Indiana, but they turn around and they lose to Minnesota pretty wholeheartedly. So it's been a pretty rough year for Michigan State. I know I've heard a few rumors myself of who they may or may not hire. I know there's not a lot of Michigan State fans, but there's a few out there who really want to hire Urban Meyer as the head coach.
That's what my thought was. And honestly, I don't know. He could be. I don't know. Does he have any interest?
They say that he's met a few times, and they say that he's been potentially interested, but more than likely no. And I can kind of see both. I'm going to lean more towards no. And the reason why I say that is, we saw what happened with Urban Meyer going into the NFL, and that was an absolute dumpster fire. And we've seen what he has done with other college programs. He ends up leaving, and now he can build a college program back up. But now you also have that most recent NFL scandal. How many people are going to now see that and go, do I really want to put up with that? And now, coming into it as, potentially the coach of the Michigan State Spartans, you're going to have to face Ohio State, every year. You're going to have to face Michigan.
Doesn't that incentivize? Like he has gone everywhere he has gone. Bowling Green, Utah, Ohio State, Florida.
Yep.
All of those. Not that Florida or Ohio State needed rebuilding necessarily, but he's done nothing but be successful every place that he's gone, except for the NFL. Nick Saban did the same thing.
Yeah,
he was a dumpster fire in the NFL too.
Yes.
So I don't know that it really matters what he's done in the NFL. It's what you can do in the college game. Now, the college game is completely different compared to what it was when he was in college, but I still attest that he could probably still do pretty well. And wouldn't that incentivize? Yes, I left Ohio State. Yes, I love Ohio State, but if he could beat them, doesn't that just solidify what he is as a coach? Not that he needs some great solidification. He's still one of the all-time greats in recent history of college football, but him coming in and revitalizing Michigan State, is that something that they could see, or they would be interested in having, and that he might be interested in doing?
I think they would be interested because, like you said, his resume speaks for himself. Yeah. But at the same time, I would propose this question. It has changed so much, and you really are having to rebuild a program from the bottom up. You're not like, Ohio State, where you had, a pretty good plethora of recruits still wanting to come there because of the brand, because of the potential pipeline into the NFL. Same with Florida. You still were going to have big matchups with Bama, with Georgia, with all of them. You're coming into a team that has very few bright spots, has already had a ton of controversy before. You left the NFL because of controversy. Now you're going to come into an even tougher Big Ten conference because you have to face your former team of Ohio State. You're going to have to face Michigan. You're going to have to face USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon. It's significantly tougher than when Urban was in. So I would almost kind of propose the opposite of, why would Urban want to take that to basically go, he was able to do it everywhere else except the last spot?
But would that do anything to his career of success? Lou Holtz was a fantastic coach at Notre Dame. He went to South Carolina. Does anybody remember him being at South Carolina? Very few do.
Yeah.
And some of the people in South Carolina want to forget.
Right.
But my point being is still people look at Lou Holtz as one of the
greatest
in recent history, kids. Let's think about it. Let's figure it that way. He's an all-time great in the aspect of, he won national championships. He rebuilt Notre Dame because they were waffling or struggling a little bit, and he came back and rebuilt them and brought them to prominence in the 80s. And then went to South Carolina.
Because why not?
Well, he didn't leave Notre Dame. He was let go.
Right.
But then he went to South Carolina, and nobody remembers that except for some. I mean, he didn't have great success there. I don't know that it does a lot if he were to say, you know what, I'm going to take a flyer on East Lansing. And you know what? He can always claim health issues. He's done it 3 different times.
I say, he's done it before.
Let's think about this too. Utah didn't have a stinking thing going on when he went to Utah.
True.
And he built them into something. Granted, it wasn't in the Pac-12 when he started with them. I believe they were in the Mountain West.
Correct.
But at the same time, he's done. He has taken a team that hasn't really had any sort of pedigree and turned it in. Look at Utah now. That's
true, yeah.
because of what Urban Meyer started back when he was there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's an interesting topic because I think you could, if I don't know that it's going to be, I'm not going to say yes, it's going to happen, but I think there's a lot more validity behind it than somebody saying, nah, he's not going to go to Michigan State. He doesn't want to do that to Ohio State. He doesn't give two hoots about that.
Oh yeah,
he cares about himself.
Oh yeah, well, because
that's human nature too.
Oh yeah, well, because you notice, look at what he did. Like we said, he's quit because of health issues, and it's like, okay, maybe he does like the challenge. Okay, I'm going to leave Utah. I'm going to go to a big boy program in Florida. What can I do in the SEC? Oh, hey, I win 2 national titles. Okay, now I want to go to Ohio State. That also needs to be fixed.
But I'm going to quit at Florida because of health reasons. And then 6 months later, take a job.
Yeah. So, and you can tell he still enjoys the game. I mean, you can look at all the kickoff shows. He loves to talk about it. He still wants to be involved, and I think he does. And who knows? Maybe this is the spot that he's kind of waiting for. He wants to go to a Power 5 school that's in a reasonable conference. That at the end of the day, especially now with the college playoff format expanding, you have a legitimate shot to make the playoffs every single year if you can do well enough.
And what are the expectations? If you were to take Michigan State's job and they say, okay, we want you to rebuild this. He rebuilds to 9 wins over the course every year over the course of 4 years. That's a heck of a lot better than the 4-8 that they are going to be this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I mean, but if he rebuilds it and appears in a couple of playoffs and going forward, guess what? He is as good. He just put himself even in higher status, I think. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where they go. And if they may not even be thinking about Urban Meyer, but I don't think that name comes out and gets talked about so much if it's not a legit possibility that they're at least going to go after him.
Well, and it was funny. I heard more inklings and more kind of the smoke behind the fire with Urban getting hired the minute that Mel Tucker was fired. The minute they said Mel Tucker was gone, I heard and saw a bunch of the rumors that Urban might be interested in potentially becoming the head coach. There's a few supposed meetings that happened between Michigan State and Urban, and then of course,
and I haven't heard him deny any of it.
I haven't openly either. I've seen rumors that he denied it, but I haven't openly seen anything that officially says no. I'm not interested.
Yeah, well. We'll see.
It's probably one of those kind of like a go into a car dealership like I'm just looking for the right deal. If it happens, it happens.
Let's stay in the state of Michigan and go to include one of Urban's former teams. Ohio State travels to Ann Arbor tomorrow to play the Wolverines in the game. The game. No, that would be wrong, right? I'd get in trouble if I did that, right?
Oh, yeah. You owe them like a quarter every time you do that.
The rivalry is rekindled tomorrow. Ohio State, number 2 Ohio State, formerly number 1 Ohio State, travels to Ann Arbor, Michigan Stadium to take on the Wolverines, number 3 Wolverines. And Tony, we haven't had you on, but let's talk about the game a little bit, and then we'll get to your thoughts on the whole scandal that's going on in Ann Arbor for that. So what do you see going on in Ann Arbor tomorrow? Is it Ohio State breaking the 2-game losing streak against Michigan, or is Michigan going to keep it going and make it 3 in a row? Who gets the honor to go beat the crap out of Iowa?
There's a part of me that says that Ohio State, I think, is going to break it, but then there's another part of me that says talent-wise, momentum, the fact that they're using the whole scandal thing is like motivation, fuel, and fire, says Michigan. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell you who I'm going to pick. I don't know if they're going to win, but I'm going to pick them.
Be confident. They're going to win, Tony. That's why you're picking them.
Yep. You know what? You're right. We're gonna go with the OH.
Wow, you own one?
We're going to go with the OH because
gross.
At the end of the day, we have to root against Michigan.
You being a Michigan State fan, I'm shocked that you're wearing something from this game.
I know. Well, again, we have to root against Michigan at the end of the day. It does a little bit. But But no, I mean, both of these teams are coming in, and I feel like Ohio State, especially within the last few weeks, the thing that I thought was really what they were struggling with in the beginning of the year,
Yeah.
has kind of settled now. They're more in an offensive rhythm. It was a mixture of, Kyle McCord didn't seem comfortable
He
in
had
the
to get his
passing
feet.
game.
He had
He
to
did.
he had to get his sea legs about him.
He did. And I think a lot of people, myself included, was kind of worried when they were only able to drop 23 on Indiana. It's like, wait a minute. This is IU we're talking about. This is IU football more specifically.
IU football, right.
You can't drop more than 23 points on them. But they finally got into a passing game. Obviously Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. have had that connection together since high school. He has to get a little bit more, kind of in tune for the more, advanced offensive system. Ibuka's finally coming into stride as well for him.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing to me, that offensive line is starting to become pretty cohesive, and Travion Henderson has finally been able to get his feet under him and be able to run the ball. That was kind of the thing that really surprised me with, especially in the beginning, the struggles with Ohio State is, you have a guy that you kind of have to get a feel for that has to be able to get his feet underneath him as far as throwing the ball with your passing attack. I don't understand why you don't rely on your big offensive line to control the line of scrimmage, run the ball so that your quarterback can get more comfortable, because at least you have a run game to rely on.
Well, I want to kind of piggyback on what you're talking about. The reason Ohio State is still undefeated, and it is because of their defense.
Yes.
They won their game against Notre Dame because their defense was able to keep Notre Dame to only 2 touchdowns, period.
Yes.
The offense was good enough to produce 17 whole points, but it was against a top 10 team in Notre Dame, and the defense held them to less than 17. So that's all. And if you look, all these games that they could have struggled in, Maryland, they held them to 17 points.
And that's the highest team that scored against them so far is Maryland. Maryland is the highest team that scored any points against
17
them with 17. Otherwise, it's been 17 or less.
Penn State, 12. Wisconsin, this juggernaut that everybody thought Wisconsin was going to be in the West. Well, juggernaut. We use that in lowercase j because it's the West.
Very lowercase.
But it would have. It's a game that people thought, okay, well, if Wisconsin's playing well enough with Luke Fickell there, you got the ties to Ohio State, there might be something, especially with it being in Madison, there might be something to where Wisconsin could maybe upset the Buckeyes. 10 points.
Yep.
Rutgers scored 6 more points than Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Then those teams that they should beat, Michigan State 38-3, Minnesota 37-3. So like you're absolutely right. Their offense is starting to click. Rutgers, they scored 35.
Yep.
Purdue beat them 41-7. So like they've got the offense starting to click, and I think you're right. They're starting to click at the right time, especially to be able to say that they're probably hitting on all of their cylinders at the right time. And to me, they're going to be the best team in the country probably after this game if they beat Michigan.
Yep.
I think they're going to beat Michigan, honestly. I really do think that they'll beat Michigan.
I do too. Like I said, it's one of those, they're hitting their stride at the right time. And honestly too, on the other side of it, you look at Ryan Day. How much motivation do you think Ryan Day has because of all the talk that has been the last couple of years? Oh, you've lost to Michigan twice and you've got absolutely destroyed in both games that you played them. But, then you can turn around and you can say, hey, we took Georgia to the absolute limit last year when they went on to end up winning the national
title. We missed
the
national championship by 6 inches.
Literally by 6 inches. And they say 6 inches isn't
10
a lot.
10 inches if you include the post.
Right? Whoa. 10 inches. You're getting into big numbers here.
Well, you've got to move it enough over to not hit the post and have it doink back. But
double doink.
Yeah.
As a Bears fan,
Thanks,
you know all about
jerk.
that. Hey, I like the Bears too.
Yeah.
But no, I mean this. I do.
Like?
Huh?
Who don't you like?
Philly. Absolutely hate Philly.
I heard you got a big affinity for Wisconsin too.
It's my hatred for Philly has grown so much. Wisconsin has moved down to like number 2. That's how much I dislike Philly. That's how much it's moved down. Wow. But no, I mean, I do think on the other side, I think that, Ryan Day is going to have motivation. And I do think finally, if there is ever going to be a game that Michigan struggles without Harbaugh, being on the sideline, I think it's this game. Because you look at all the other games, they didn't have him for Penn State. At the end of the day, I've heard a lot of people, even people in Pennsylvania, say that they don't really believe Drew Aller is the true good quarterback for Penn State.
Because at the beginning of the season, he was the next coming of Kerry Collins.
Right. For
those of you that don't know who Kerry Collins was, he played at Penn State and he was really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Then they take on a Maryland team who is also really good. Maryland, ended up keeping it close at the end, and Michigan ended up coming away with the victory overall. But between both of those teams, we obviously know Ohio State's better. Their defense is better. Their offense is better. So I do think Ohio State has an opportunity now to.
And we're going. And when you say that, well, let's preface that just a touch, because when you say that, you're talking about this season to this point.
Yes.
How they've performed to this point. Because if you look at Michigan's schedule, and is it coincidence? Maybe. I know people are saying, well, it's cut and dry evidence that the cheating matters, the sign stealing matters. And we'll get to your thoughts here after I piggyback off of this. Purdue was the first game they played after all of this came flushing out and they got rid of Stallions and all that.
Mm-hmm.
They won 41 to 13.
Yep.
Since then, they beat Penn State 24-15, and they beat Maryland 31-24. They're not playing the best football that they've played.
No.
Everybody's beating Purdue this year. So we're not going to say that, well, look at that. They should have beat them by more. Period.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is where it's coming from. The week before all this came out, they beat Michigan State 49-0. So there are people saying, okay, well, obviously that sign stealing and that cheating matters. I don't see it that way. I see it as all of a sudden all this stuff gets dumped on them, which it's still there. It's not going to change. And if they win tomorrow, how many people are going to call this a valid win?
Oh, every Michigan fan ever.
Other than Michigan, nobody will call that a valid win, period.
Nope.
Because of all the stuff going on. I'm not saying that Michigan should just forfeit the game. No, you go out there, you let those guys go out there and you play the game. Because that's why we've got a discipline system and an investigative system in place to be able to flesh that out. It sucks that it's going to be retroactive if there's any sort of penalty. It really does. And you can't convince me, other than what you just mentioned, there's a slight value in having Harbaugh on the sidelines right now, tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's not a ton that a head coach is going to do that's going to make things. And if they're sign stealers, they've got to have some way of figuring out that Harbaugh can be on a cell phone talking to somebody, right? I mean, let's look at it that way. But so like the punishment that they gave. Well, actually, you know what? Let's get your thoughts on this, because is the Harbaugh suspension enough to quell the Big Ten coaches and make everything that Michigan does going forward from then valid?
I'll say this, because I actually heard somebody kind of bring this up, and it did kind of make me think a little bit. And I, retroactively looking at it, I think they acted too soon. And the reason why I say that is because now you have you had the full amount of time to do a complete and total investigation on everything? Because if you haven't, you've already dished out a punishment. You can't
pile onto it.
Yeah, you can't add on to it, and you can't backtrack. You can't
unless
take that away.
There's new stuff that comes out from what was already discovered prior to the punishment.
Right. But then you would also have to say, okay, well, now you're also being punished for this. So that's the only thing where I would say I kind of wish they would have almost waited to take more of time, not for Michigan's favor, but just so that way, if there is something, that they could be punished appropriately to where they're supposed to be punished.
But did the Big Ten, trust me, I've thought about this. Did Petitti say, you know what, we're going to punish them now with this. This is going to be the punishment Michigan gets. That way, if more comes out and we don't punish them, the Big Ten or Big Ten coaches can't come, well, you need to do something. We did because you threw a fit. We did. We can't punish them more because now it's after the season.
Right.
At the time that they doled out that punishment, there was going to be no forfeiture of games during the season unless there's more. That's the thing. If the NCAA doesn't come up with anything other than what Michigan's got, I am guessing that the NCAA is not going to make them forfeit their games. I don't know unless it has to do with the games that Stallions was at.
Maybe. Well, here's the other thing I think too, because obviously I've seen a bunch of Michigan fans kind of complain that, everyone's only picking on Michigan. I kind of look at it as individual charges on somebody. You haven't exactly been found guilty or innocent, but you've been charged with it.
Right.
You were
we
charged
have enough to charge you on it.
Exactly. You were charged with a recruitment issue back earlier in the year with, again, another
sorts of investigation.
Another a 3-game suspension. You fought it, and
well, let's say it this way though, that was not an NCAA sanctioned suspension for Harbaugh at the beginning though, because you remember they agreed to a 4-game suspension.
Correct.
And then the NCAA said no, we're not going to honor that agreement, so Michigan took it upon themselves.
Right. So
there still can be a punishment doled out because of that.
Yes. So you're charged
and maybe
with that.
That's where the Big Ten went with.
And
I punish you now for this, and then if the NCAA comes back and punishes you for the recruiting thing,
we're going to add on
piled onto the sign stealing.
Exactly, and that's my exact thoughts. I think that is what's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing that I think kind of fuels into it, and I wonder what they'll find whenever they go through this, is because, and I don't know if you and Dalton have talked about it or if you guys have seen it too. Don't you guys think it's kind of weird the timing of all of this? That's what's happened with Michigan, and I'm going to go as far back as COVID. It's 2020. It's a shortened season, so obviously we didn't have a lot of games. We didn't get to see.
There's only 5 or 6 games per team, wasn't it?
It was 6.
Yeah.
So
no. Michigan or Ohio State only played 5 that year, but got the exemption because IU should have went to the Big Ten championship game that year.
Yes. Because they had Michael Penix as their quarterback,
and they had enough games to qualify. The Big Ten put the qualifier of you have to play at least 6 games. IU had played their 6 games. Ohio State, the Michigan game got canceled, I believe.
Yes.
So they couldn't play their 6 games, and they went, oh, wait, we met in less, and they let Ohio State into the championship game.
Right.
Not knocking anybody for loving Ohio State, but that is BS. And I'm a Purdue fan, for crying out loud. IU should have been playing for the Big Ten championship of that year.
Agreed. But don't you think it's weird though that so in 2020 Michigan goes 2-4, abysmal.
Right.
But a lot of guys they have on the roster, they were freshmen or they were sophomores, so they're going to be here for a couple years. Obviously, then they get the extension because of the COVID year. They could play. They could play one more year. Then 2021 comes around. Michigan goes on a dominant run. The only loss that they have in the regular season is to their big in-state rival of Michigan State, and thanks to Kenneth Walker, and then they're able to turn around and they beat Ohio State, and that's kind of the highlight of Michigan's season. Okay, we did it. We beat the big rival. We have bragging rights for.
Then we went and got housed by Georgia.
Exactly. So to me, I can almost see that as okay. They had a good off season. They've worked hard. They were able to turn it around. That's realistic. But then the next year comes around and they do the same thing all over again, except this time they beat Michigan State and they beat Ohio State wholeheartedly again. And then they end up getting, beat by TCU to kind of everyone's surprise. Is that not kind
TCU?
Of right? Is that not kind of surprising to not only you, but to everybody else that this is a team that pretty much all the way up until COVID, like you said with Urban Meyer to Michigan State, 9-10 wins a year, but you can't beat Michigan State and you definitely can't beat Ohio State. But all of a sudden now you can beat them 2 years in a row and you can beat everybody except for basically Georgia and TCU.
Recruiting goes in cycles, though.
It does.
It really does. I mean, Blake Corum is a damn good running back.
Mm-hmm.
And so JJ McCarthy is a really good quarterback. Running back is what I meant if I said quarterback for Corum.
Yeah, he hasn't been throwing the ball much. At
he's
all.
A good running back. I mean, he's a great running back. He's one of the nation's best. McCarthy is a really good quarterback. I'm not going to call him a Heisman. Some people have said you shouldn't go a full half without passing the ball if you're a Heisman candidate.
Correct.
Sorry,
And
it doesn't matter if that's what the coach's decision or whatever. A coach should never make that decision if he's really a Heisman candidate.
And to add to your point too, of kind of the odyssey of, you know, they beat Purdue pretty wholeheartedly, but then Penn State and Maryland, McCarthy only threw for 200 yards between both games.
Yeah,
he only threw
right.
for 60 yards against Penn State.
Well, in Penn State, they didn't throw the ball in the second half. Period.
Yeah, which is
they ran the ball every single play.
mind-blowing.
And that it's mind-blowing that they beat Penn State doing that. But to that's another thing is Penn State is totally blindsides me in how they conduct themselves in big games, because Ohio State, they went so super uber conservative that they couldn't get out of their own way. And kind of the same thing with Michigan. They just didn't. Yes, Drew Alred is not the next coming of Kerry Collins. And it's sad that is the height of quarterbacks at Penn State that we've got to base it on. But he was a good quarterback at Penn State, so I'm not gonna poo-poo that too much.
Yeah.
But
and
I mean,
at the end of the day, you know, Penn State is still what, 10-2?
Yeah, they'll end up 10-2.
Yeah,
they'll end up 10-2. Because I don't think Michigan State's going to beat them. I really
no.
Now, could they? Absolutely. I think by the end of this evening, you could look at Penn State and say, "Wow, 9-3, pretty disappointing season." As a Purdue fan, I'll take 9-3 as a disappointing season any day of the week and twice on Sunday. But my point being is, you know, Penn State has really baffled me in how they perform in those big games. But to get back to the Michigan thing, they shouldn't be going a full half without throwing the ball. They just shouldn't be.
No.
Period.
No. Well, and it's funny too, because I know you and Dalton talked about this, where Matt Rule kind of came out and defended the whole, you know, sign stealing thing of, you know,
to a point I did.
Yeah.
To a point I did.
Yeah, because and like he said, there's nothing against that. Now, like they said, if you're hiring people to go to the games to do that, you know,
there's a difference.
There's a difference, and there's a difference.
There's an actual rule that says you cannot do that.
Yes.
So they've legitimately went out of their way, if that can be proven that Michigan was behind it, which it's almost proven already. Yes. But if it can be proven, they violated a written rule and they deserve to be punished for it.
Correct. Because, yeah, I mean, heck, how many coaches watch film? And even a lot of, you know, NFL guys kind of admitted that, you know, you watch game on the film. You're not only watching what the players do, you're watching the coaches.
No, for sure you are.
You know, what hand sign are they using? What code word are they using? That means, you know, that they're going to go into this, that they're going to do this. That's just studying.
But then you also have coaches saying that doesn't matter if the other team knows their knows signs. Coaches change their signs every
week, or they should.
Every week. No. Good coaches change their signs every week.
Exactly.
So it's going to be interesting to see where all this goes with Michigan, because you could very well see, no matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what happens in the Big Ten championship, there's a good chance that this year Michigan's going to be 0-12. I mean, I can foresee that happening as being they're gonna I take that back. They just may not have a record from this year. They may be vacated. They're not going to be 0-12. They'll just be 0-0 because they're going to vacate every win that they got. Or they could be 0-1 because they might get beat by Ohio State, which I think they will, and they'll be 0-1 for the season, the 2023 season.
And you know how mad Michigan fans are going to be because you're going to take away that 1,000th win that they got against Maryland.
Oh, pumpkin.
So sad.
We'll give you a hug later.
I won't.
Now, here's the thing. They very well may not have to forfeit anything.
Right.
But I foresee there's going to be enough to say, yeah, we're going to have to vacate those wins for you guys. And then, it's going to be everybody against Michigan.
And
Michigan against the world.
Real quick to add to that, too, I heard and I've seen supposed rumors, and I don't think there's any truth or validity to it, but I thought it was funny. They were going to leave the Big Ten? Big Ten? Yes.
I think that's hilarious. That is the funniest thing I had heard, because I'm like, are you kidding me? You seriously over this?
Yep.
Over this.
Yep. And it's funny.
And they actually talked about it.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's funny too. I talked about it with another guy who likes college football, and he was like, you know, what do you think? Do you think Michigan would leave the Big Ten? He goes, that would be crazy. Like, they're a Big Ten fundamental. I go, where are they going to go where they're going to make that much money?
No, that's the kicker, is they can't.
That too, they can't. But where are they going to go that they're going to potentially make that much money? Nowhere.
Nowhere.
The SEC is going to be making good money, but you're not going to get nearly the amount. Oh, and also,
you got to play Alabama,
you're going to get your butt kicked every single game. So have fun with that.
Well, they'll play Vanderbilt some years, I'm sure. But anyway, so it'll be interesting to see where this heads after the season. But it's going to be a good game tomorrow. I'm going to watch it and see. I'm not going to have a rooting interest. I just don't care.
Hey, everybody,
I care enough to watch it, but I don't care about who wins. Because I honestly think they're both going to make because if Michigan loses, it's going to be a loss to the number 2 team in the country. If Ohio State loses, it's going to be the number 3 team in the country. It's going to drop them maybe, but it's not. I don't know that it'll drop them out of the top 4. And if it does, you better hope that Washington wins if they stay at number 4, or that Florida State wins out, which is going to be interesting because they don't have their quarterback.
Yep.
And because if they don't, that other Big Ten team's going to move back in. And Oregon could sneak in, but if Florida State, there are a lot of moving pieces, and I think I think there's a really good chance that both these teams make it to the playoff anyway.
I think it'll be interesting because, and there's another guy that broke this down, especially if hypothetically, if Alabama wins out, and that includes beating Georgia in the SEC title game, then what do? Because then Texas has a win over Bama, and Bama's gotten better. Texas is the better team. Okay, well, now if we're going to put a
one, what they're going to do? They're going to expand it out to 12 teams this year.
Dude, I bet they would, because here's the thing. Here's the thing that this guy pointed out that made 100% sense. The College Football Playoff Committee would be in such a bad position because then, if they put in Alabama,
wouldn't Oklahoma need to be in it because they only have one loss to Oklahoma State, right?
No, they have 2.
Oh, do they? Okay, that eliminates Oklahoma then.
Yeah, so
I was gonna say because they beat Texas.
Yeah, but it was funny because they're like the College Football Playoff would hate this because then you have to put Texas in over Alabama, but Alabama just beat the number 1 team in the country. But then if you put
Georgia's
Alabama,
still number 1, like they're still a number 1 team.
And then if you put Alabama in over Texas, then it shows, okay, well, the regular season doesn't matter.
All that
matters is at the end of the year, who do they really want in? So
right.
I agree. I think they would have an emergency meeting and be like, you know what? We're just going to do 12.
We're going to expand it out to 12 this year.
It's 2024. It's
Christmas to everybody
already. Yeah, it's 2024 already. We're
just going to fast forward this calendar a couple of months to make it 2024, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah, I bet money that would happen. I bet money it would happen.
So it'll be interesting. Let's change gears since we're in the feast week. Let's move to college basketball, and what an exciting season the preseason is, and it's not the games against Samford or Florida A&M. It's the games that you go to play on location for these preseason tournaments. There are a ton of Big Ten teams that are involved in tournaments, preseason tournaments, and one being my Boilermakers went to Maui. Tony, they went to Maui. They beat number 11 Gonzaga, number 7 Tennessee, and then number 4 Marquette. With Kansas getting beat by Marquette in the semifinals, that's going to put Purdue at number 1 in the country. And deservedly so. They've worked they've beat everybody. They have the best resume right now with 3 top 11 wins already in their first 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
But we look at others, Wisconsin thumping Virginia. I don't know if that was in a tournament game, but I know that they played. IU beats Louisville. I mean, don't get me wrong, Louisville is a team that is on the rebuild compared to what they have been when Coach Pitino was there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's still a pedigree. That's a pretty good, and for IU to be rebuilding at the time that they are, they've done a good job. They've lost the game. I don't even know who they lost to, honestly. I haven't been paying attention enough to them, but they're doing what needs to be done to kind of solidify their number 5 or 6 in the conference. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking at the standings, and have you looked at the standings? Please tell me no.
I have not actually.
Okay, tell me. Purdue's 6-0. There's one other team in the Big Ten that's undefeated. Can you tell me who it is?
One other team that is undefeated.
You got 13 tries, actually 12 because 11 because IU and Michigan State have lost.
True. I'm going to go on a real wild shot in the dark, and I'm going to say Northwestern.
Northwestern is 4-1. They lost their last game.
4-1.
Minnesota is 4-1, which is impressive for what Minnesota is. IU is 4-1. Illinois is 4-1. Ohio State's 3-1. Purdue is 6-0. That leaves the Nebraska Cornhuskers as the other undefeated team in the Big Ten. If you had Nebraska as one of the two remaining undefeated teams on your bingo card, you win.
You would win so much money. If that was the actual thing you could cash out right now, you'd win so much money.
13 of the teams are at 500 or better, which this is not a surprise. The Big Ten, or most conferences, most of the major conferences, most of their teams have a really good regular or preseason record, whether they go to a tournament, whether they play just a bunch of teams that are below them or whatever, or even if they get an upset in there. Most of them have a decent preseason record. There's only one team that's got a losing record. Do you know that team?
I'm gonna say Penn State.
Penn State is 4-1.
4-1.
Yep. It is the Maryland Terrapins. They are 2-3. They've beaten Mount St. Mary's. They lost to Davidson. They lost to UAB, and they lost to number 21 Villanova. And then they beat University of Maryland, Baltimore County the other day. So they are 2-3, which these guys are my number 3 team in the conference. Them and Illinois are going to fight for number 3 in the conference. And I think personally, well, up until now, but I think Maryland is the better of those two teams.
Yeah.
Illinois is good. They're going to be good. They're going to be fine. Maryland, I just think Maryland, with the coach that they have and the stuff they have in the players they have in the cupboard, are going to be enough to get number 3. Nobody is touching the top 2, period. And it doesn't matter that Michigan State is sitting at 13th in the conference right now at 3-3.
No. And that's what I was getting ready to say. I mean, we can talk about this all we want. And I mean, and these games luckily do matter, to a point. Right. But, that's kind of the beauty of a lot of the in-conference rivalry. And that's the beauty of, what's coming to December and kind of coming to almost the end of December when we have more in-conference play is all those go out the window. Because I mean, heck, we've talked about it the last couple of years. Look at how well Maryland has done against teams. I mean, taking teams to the absolute edge. Look at Rutgers took Purdue to the absolute edge a couple of times,
beat them, and then took them to the end.
So that's what I love about Big Ten basketball is you can obviously Purdue can atone to this. You can have the best record in the entire country. Rutgers comes in, Northwestern comes in. They're like, pump the brakes on that. We're gonna give you a run for your money. You ain't getting no just dominant win.
We're gonna take a pipe to your knees, pal.
Literally. Let's go outside and have a chat.
No, that's Tennessee. Tennessee does that. Sorry.
Ooh, got him.
So the one team that I kind of was surprised by, because honestly, I have been talking about this being a make or break season for this gentleman, this coach, and Michigan's sitting at 4-2. Now, granted, they lost the other night against Memphis.
Yep.
And prior to that, they lost to, I can't remember.
Long Beach
State.
Yep.
So they've lost 2 in a row.
But
they're playing pretty well. Granted, they beat St. John's by 16 as well. So Michigan's playing somewhat well. Now, granted, they beat Stanford
recently,
just yesterday. They've got Texas Tech coming up today or tomorrow. Today. It's today.
Yeah,
at
today
6. Then they're at Oregon, which those next 2 games are going to be tough. But if they can win one, maybe even both of those, they're going to enter their first couple of games at Big Ten against IU and Iowa with a pretty decent record and a pretty strong showing thus far.
Yeah, 6-2.
And the Wolverines surprised some people and put themselves in the top 5 of the Big Ten.
I'm going to say no, And I say that because when you lose a piece as big as Hunter Dickinson, you lost a lot of pieces to the NBA
Jet
draft
Howard,
as well. You lost Jet
Buffkin.
Howard. And we've seen really an underperforming Michigan team. When you had all those guys on there for the last couple of years, you've really underperformed to the expectations that everybody had of you. I see Michigan kind of just falling to the wayside. And honestly, I see this potentially as Howard's last season, because it's like,
Well,
okay, you've had the talent, but what have you done with it? You didn't do anything.
at what point when they start struggling does Juwan Howard blow up like he has the previous 2 seasons? You know, I mean,
Ooh.
I don't think he did yet last year. It was the 2 previous, the one where he got in an actual physical altercation with Wisconsin's coaches.
Let's
And
see.
then the year before, when he threatened Mark Turgeon at Maryland during the tournament,
Well, let's see.
during the Big Ten tournament. Last year, he didn't have a breakdown. I don't remember.
No, he did not. Now, if I remember
Good
right,
for him. He went a whole year without one.
right, he won one good year. Well, let's see. He faces
That just is
Maryland.
one good year, meaning behaviorally, not
Yes.
performing.
It's kind of like whenever you're in jail. Oh yeah, he's had great behavior this
He's
year.
out on good behavior. Really? He's in jail.
Like,
No,
what does this mean? This is like being the valedictorian of a homeschool. Like, this doesn't matter. So they go to Maryland on January 11th, so it's possible then. And then about a month later, they host Wisconsin. So,
but I don't know that it's going to be the same teams that light his fire. But if they
Right.
go to, let's say, in the middle of February, go to Lincoln and lose to Nebraska, if
Which they do,
Nebraska's
by the
come
way.
back to earth,
Mm-hmm.
is there going to be something that triggers him that he just loses it? I don't know, and I don't want my disdain for Michigan, meaning I just don't like Michigan because I'm a Purdue fan,
Mm-hmm.
to come through as I hope this happens. I'm going by what I've witnessed from this so far. Like, he has shown that he's very volatile. Unless last year was the new path, something's going to happen that's going to trigger him, at least to where he gets verbally into an altercation with somebody.
And I think you're right. I think so that game in Lincoln is on February 10th,
Mhm.
and then 3 days later they go to Illinois to face it. I think at that point we may or may not see it, because at that point in the season you've got 6 games left. That's probably going to determine whether or not you're even able to be in the tournament, or if you're going to be some type of force in the
That's
tournament.
my point.
And where
What if
you're
they lose?
standing.
What if they perform kind of in that bubble area and they get to this point and they lose it?
I think he's done. And again, that wouldn't surprise me, because like we said, Michigan has had such great talent, but they've done absolutely nothing with it, which is what's surprising. And what is that? And is that on the players, or is it on the coach? To
I
me,
think
it
it's a little
starts
bit
with
of
the
both.
coach.
It starts
I
with the
mean, it is a
coach.
little bit of both, but to me, it starts with the coach, because you putting your players in the best position to succeed? Are you putting them in positions to win? Now, again, if it's one of those, it's kind of a typical basketball game of you're finishing really close, like you just got beat on a last shot. Okay, that's one thing. You're getting beat. You're getting beat like wholeheartedly. Like, you're not losing by 3. You're losing by like 10. Like,
And their
I
2
could see it.
losses as of at this point, they're Memphis. They lost by 4, so it was
By
a
4.
relatively. But they got beat by 8 points by Long Beach State. And
Yeah.
if you're not familiar with who Long Beach State is, welcome to the club. There's not many people that do.
Mhm.
Because
Say it,
I remember growing up that Long Beach State made it to the tournament a couple of times and wasn't a high seed, but they maybe a 10 seed or something. So like I've heard of them.
and at
They
least
haven't been valid in the past 20 years.
Yeah. And at least Memphis is actually a good basketball team. They're 5-0 in the American right now. They beat Michigan, and
How did that game go? You've got Juwan Howard on one side and Anthony Hardaway, who likes to throw things, on the other side. Surprised there wasn't anything going on there.
They just upset number 20 Arkansas 84-79
to get to that game, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to play Michigan. So yeah, I mean, but my whole thought is that this could be an overachieving game or season for Michigan. It could also be the demise of Juwan Howard.
Mm-hmm.
A lot hinges on the next month They play Florida. They've got McNeese State or McNeese. That should be a W. But they've got Eastern Michigan. They lost to them last year, if I remember correctly.
I think so too.
And so, like, there are some games that could be some
trap games,
some trap games for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worry. I don't worry personally, but I worry in the aspect of, if they're not performing like they should, I don't know that there's any way that Juwan Howard comes back next year. I just don't know that there can be.
Yeah, I don't see it at all.
But it'll be interesting to see there, because Michigan being all involved in everything, both basketball and football. But but yeah, the biggest surprise to me so far is that Nebraska 6-0 record. Now, who they have beaten is let's go to their schedule. They've beaten Lindwood. They've beaten Florida A&M, Rider, Stony Brook. They beat Oregon State, and they beat Duquesne. Yeah. Now they play Fullerton, Cal State Fullerton on Monday, Sunday. Then they play number 8 Creighton. That's probably going to be their first loss, unless Nebraska is just going to shock the world and go undefeated until, Big Ten season kicks off, which is ironically their next game is when they kick off their Big Ten schedule.
Hey, never know. It could happen.
But it'll be interesting to see how this Big Ten plays out. I looking at the schedule, and I know I say that it'd be interesting to see. There's a lot of uncertainty that we're not sure what's going to happen. But I would bet my mortgage on the fact that I think Michigan State will be up there, right there with Purdue.
Yep.
Shortly. They're like, hey, hold on, we'll be there in a minute. We stopped in Arizona, which they fell to Arizona, but played well. So they
played close.
Yeah. So there's and Purdue's got them coming up very soon, Arizona. So that'll be a top 3 matchup at least, if not number 1 and number 2, because I've seen some prognostication that they figure Marquette might move up to number 2, even though they lost, but they beat number 1 and then lost to number 2. So that's why they kind of thought maybe Marquette would move up, but it could be a number 1, number 2 matchup, Purdue and Arizona in Indianapolis, if I remember correctly.
Ooh.
So
I know where Sam's going.
Depending on the day, I would love to. That would be a great. I've never seen Purdue in a number 1, number 2 matchup ever. Because until just 3 years ago, I'd never seen Purdue number 1, and I've only seen them number 2 once before.
Right.
So, but Illinois, I think they'll stay right where they're at and just kind of keep treading water and competing, beating some teams that they shouldn't, and then lose to some teams that they should beat. But they're going to stay right at number 3. IU right now is sitting. It's a log jam. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams tied at for third at 4-1. So that's going to shuffle its way out. Rutgers is going to shuffle their way out, I'm sure. Penn State is 4-1 right now. Northwestern, Minnesota's not that good.
No,
they're better, but they're not that good. No. So I think you'll have Wisconsin moving their way up. You'll have Michigan State definitely moving their way up, and I anticipate Maryland going right up there with Michigan State and getting up in there into the top 5 with and fighting Illinois for number 3. Right now, I still have nothing has changed my mind, including the 3-3 start for Michigan State, that deters me from saying number 1 is number 1 and number 2 are Purdue and Michigan State. Probably to me, and especially to me, in that order. Yeah. But Illinois and Maryland are the number 3 and 4 team. I just don't know which order.
Right. And like we said, with Big Ten basketball, you never know. Everybody's going to keep it close.
Yep.
But I do agree. I think Purdue's going to be number 1 because they're being battle tested right now, and then obviously Michigan State's going to be number 2 just because of how battle tested they're going to be.
Yep. Well, it's going to be interesting. It's such a great weekend because of the sports. You literally can turn the TV on at 11:30, have a little breather, some coffee or whatever, and get kicked off at noon, and probably watch until about 3:00 in the morning. Sports of some sort, including basketball, football. It's going to be a great weekend, especially when it starts in ad nauseum on Friday and runs all the way through Monday.
Yep.
or Sunday, I mean. So it'll be interesting to see how everything plays out. Purdue going to win the Oaken Bucket, but that nobody's interested in that except for Purdue fans because of the records of the teams.
And adding of stuff that people probably aren't as interested in, we have to say our final goodbye to the Pac-12 unless something happens. The final Pac-12 game is going to happen tomorrow night.
Do we need a moment of silence?
Unfortunately, the very last game of the Pac-12 history is going to be California at UCLA at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. And that is going to be the quote-unquote end of the Pac-12 unless something crazy happens.
Well, they'll have a championship game.
That's true. That's true.
But we can have a moment of silence. Okay, that's enough.
And it's done.
So, Tony, you're going to fill in for me on this part since I'm filling in for Dalton in the lead. So why don't you go ahead and let people know where we can, where they can find us?
Sure. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and the app formerly known as Twitter called X at Big Talk. And that is B1G _talk. Remember B1G _talk. You can also find us on Facebook at Big Talk. Again, B1G Talk with or without the underscore. Totally up to you.
But not all.
But not all. That's true. Because there's a difference.
Yes.
Big difference.
There is. Yes.
Big B1G difference. You can also find us every week on the All Sports All Plays Network, which you can get through the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. And you can also find us later on the Lounge Media Group as well.
Anywhere you find podcasts, Tony.
That too.
Anywhere. And
Spotify,
if you want to watch
Google,
us,
Apple.
If you want to watch us, go to Spotify because our video is up.
Ooh.
It's amazing what they do for us.
Right.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's show for Big Talk. We're so excited to have things going forward. We're looking forward to what's going on, both football and basketball wise for the conference. And so, Dalton, enjoy your time working in Cancun. It's a rough assignment, but for Dalton Shetler, who is out working. That's Tony Hollinsworth, who's filled in for Dalton. I'm Sam Sprunger. From all of us here at Big Talk, happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy some time with friends, family, anybody that makes you happy. You go spend that time with them, and we'll see you later.
Yep.